Welcome to our deep dive on habits. We've got excerpts from The Power of Habit to explore today, and you've got questions about how they work, how they form, and most importantly, how to change them.
You are in the right place. We'll unpack those questions using real-world examples, football teams, Alcoholics Anonymous, even nail-biting grad students, and we'll uncover the science behind it all.
Sounds fascinating. The book starts with a story about Tony Dungy, coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They were struggling back in the 90s, and Dungy had this, I don't know, radical idea that instead of trying to eliminate his players' bad habits, he was going to help them change them. Did that actually work?
It did, and the key was understanding how habits function at a neurological level. They're not just choices we make. They're deeply ingrained patterns wired into our brains, specifically areas like the basal ganglia. Dungy realized he couldn't just tell his players to stop doing what came naturally.
So how did he actually change their habits?
He tapped into something scientists call the habit loop. Think of it like this. You get a cue, like feeling stressed. You follow a routine, like eating a cookie. And you get a reward, like feeling better. Dungy's genius was figuring out how to change the routine without messing with the cue or the reward.
Interesting. Can you give us an example of how he did this?
Absolutely. Take Reagan Upshaw, one of Dungy's defensive ends. Instead of telling him to stop reacting emotionally to the opposing team, Dungy trained him to respond to very specific cues on the field. A lineman's foot position, their shoulders, the spacing. Upshaw became so drilled on these cues that he could react in a split second without even thinking.
So Dungy was basically rewiring his players' responses, using the same triggers but leading to better actions on the field. Makes sense. And the book calls this rewiring the golden rule of habit change, right? If you keep the same cue and the same reward, you can swap out the routine and the habit will change.
Exactly. It's about understanding those triggers and rewards. The Buccaneers' success under Dungy is a great example of this rule in action.
Okay, so we've seen how this works in football, but can we see it somewhere else?
The book dives into Alcoholics Anonymous, which is an interesting example because at first glance, you wouldn't think of it as a habit-changing machine, but it actually embodies the golden rule quite effectively.
I'm curious, how so?
Well, think about the core principles of AA. Steps 4 and 5 encourage members to identify their personal cues and rewards associated with drinking, essentially pinpointing what triggers their cravings and what they get out of it.
So they're understanding their own habit loops, but how does AA help them change the routine?
That's where the community aspect comes in. Meetings, sponsors, shared stories, these provide alternative routines and rewards that fulfill the same needs that were once met by alcohol. Instead of isolating themselves with a bottle, members are connecting with others, building relationships, and finding support.
So it's not just about willpower, it's about finding new ways to satisfy those underlying cravings and changing the whole context of the habit.
Exactly. And AA emphasizes something else crucial for changing habits: the power of belief. There's a story in the book about a recovering alcoholic named John, who credits his success not just to the program's structure, but to his belief that change was truly possible.
Belief. That's interesting. Does the book say why belief is so important when it comes to breaking habits?
There's a lot of research on this. People who believe they can change are more likely to stick with it, especially when they hit a bump in the road. It's like belief acts as a buffer against those moments of weakness. They're more resilient, more willing to try again when they slip up.
So it's not just about understanding the mechanics of the habit loop. It's about having that inner conviction that you can actually change.
Right.
And the book brings us back to Tony Dungy to illustrate this point, right?
Yes. Remember how even with effective routines in place, the Buccaneers struggled until a shared sense of belief solidified within the team?
Right. They had the skills, but they needed that extra something to push them over the edge. And that something came from a very unexpected and tragic place.
Dungy's son passed away, and this profoundly affected the entire team. They rallied around their coach, offering support and drawing strength from their shared grief.
And this shared experience, as heartbreaking as it was, fostered a deeper sense of belief and unity within the team. They were playing for something bigger than themselves now.
And that newfound belief translated into a remarkable shift in their performance. The Colts, now under Dungy's leadership, went on to win the Super Bowl that year. It's a powerful example of how belief can emerge from the most unexpected places and have a profound impact on our ability to change.
So we've seen the power of belief in transforming a football team. But can this same principle apply to more everyday habits? What about something like nail biting?
The book actually dives into that exact habit. It tells the story of Mandy, a grad student who struggled with chronic nail biting. She tried everything to stop willpower, nasty tasting polish, nothing worked.
So how did she finally break the habit?
She went to a therapist who specialized in something called habit reversal training. And you guessed it, it's all about applying that golden rule. First, Mandy had to really understand her habit loop.
Identify those cues and rewards, right? Figure out what was triggering her to bite her nails in the first place.
Exactly. And it turned out that for Mandy, the cue was a subtle tension in her fingertips. Right before she started biting, she'd feel this slight discomfort. And the reward, that sense of completion and physical stimulation she got after she'd bitten all her nails down.
Okay, I see how that fits into the habit loop. But how do you change a deeply ingrained habit like that?
Well, the therapist didn't try to eliminate the cue or the reward. Instead, she helped Mandy insert a new routine. Whenever she felt that tension in her fingertips, she would immediately put her hands in her pockets or grip a pencil, physically preventing her from biting. Then she'd find something else to provide a quick physical stimulation, like rubbing her arm or tapping her knuckles on the desk.
So same cue, same reward, but a totally different routine. Did it work?
It did. After practicing this new routine consistently, Mandy was able to break the nail-biting habit for good. That competing response, putting her hands in her pockets or gripping a pencil, became automatic, replacing the old destructive behavior.
That's amazing. It shows how understanding the mechanics of your habits can give you the power to change them. But as we've heard, belief also plays a huge role.
Absolutely. The book really drives home the point that for some habits, belief is that key ingredient that makes the change stick. Even with a new routine in place, it's easy to fall back into old patterns when you're stressed or facing challenges.
That's so true. We all have those moments where we want to give in to our old habits.
But that's where belief comes in. Believing in your ability to change, trusting the process, can give you the resilience to push through those tough moments and stick with the new routine.
So taking what we've learned, how can we apply these insights to change our own habits?
The book offers some great advice. First, identify your habit loop. What's the cue? What's the routine? What's the reward? Once you understand how your habit works, you can start to brainstorm alternative routines that provide the same reward, but without the negative consequences.
Right, so like if your habit is reaching for a bag of chips when you're stressed after work, you could try finding a healthier way to de-stress, like going for a walk or talking to a friend. But what about the belief piece? How do we cultivate that?
That's where community can be so powerful. Surround yourself with people who support your goals, who believe in your ability to change. Find a group, a friend, or a mentor who can hold you accountable and offer encouragement when you're struggling.
It's like having your own personal cheering section for your habit change journey.
Exactly. And research actually suggests that even just seeing other people successfully change their habits can boost your own belief. It makes it feel more attainable, more real.
So we've seen how these principles can help individuals. But you mentioned earlier that habits can shape not just people, but also companies, organizations, even entire communities. Can you tell us more about that?
That's a great point. And the book delves into how those same principles can apply on a larger scale. Let's take companies, for example. Just like people, companies have habits, ingrained ways of operating, making decisions, interacting with customers. These habits can either drive success or hold a company back.
So are you saying a company can actually identify and change its habits just like a person can?
That's exactly what I'm saying. And the book gives some pretty fascinating examples. One that stands out is the story of Paul O'Neill, the former CEO of Alcoa, a huge aluminum manufacturing company.
I'm intrigued. Tell us more about Paul O'Neill and his approach to changing Alcoa's habits.
Well, when O'Neill took over Alcoa back in 1987, the company was struggling. It was known for its bureaucracy and a pretty lackluster safety record. A lot of investors were skeptical about O'Neill. They expected him to focus on things like profits and efficiency, but O'Neill had a different idea.
Okay, I'm hooked. What was his plan? So instead of focusing on profits, what did O'Neill prioritize?
He made a bold move. His top priority, he declared, would be worker safety. He wanted Alcoa to become the safest company in America.
That's a pretty radical shift for a CEO, especially in an industry known for being, well, dangerous. How did people react?
Many were confused. They couldn't understand why O'Neill wasn't talking about the usual things, maximizing shareholder value or streamlining operations.
So how did he convince everyone that this focus on safety was the right move?
Well, O'Neill believed that focusing on worker safety would create a ripple effect. It would transform the entire culture of Alcoa.
It sounds like he was going for a big change, not just tweaking things around the edges.
Exactly. He knew that to change the company's habits, he needed to change how information flowed, so he implemented a new system.
What did this new system look like?
He empowered every worker, from the factory floor to the executive suite, to identify and report safety hazards. And here's the really important part. O'Neill insisted that every incident, no matter how small, had to be reported directly to him within 24 hours.
That's pretty hands-on for a CEO. What was the reasoning behind that?
O'Neill understood that changing a company's habits requires changing the way information flows. By requiring those immediate reports, he created a new feedback loop. It forced everyone to pay attention to safety in a way they hadn't before.
It sounds like he was wiring a new habit loop into the company's DNA, making safety a core value and not just a slogan.
Precisely. And the results were pretty amazing. Within a year of O'Neill taking over, Alcoa's net income hit a record high. And over the next decade, the company's safety record improved dramatically.
So by focusing on changing one key habit, worker safety, O'Neill transformed the entire company, and that led to a safer work environment and increased profits.
That's the power of what the book calls keystone habits. They can trigger a cascade of positive changes throughout an organization. And they can be anything that fundamentally shifts the way a company operates. It doesn't have to be safety.
So it's not just about changing any habit. It's about finding the ones that will have the biggest impact.
Exactly. Think about habits related to communication, innovation, customer service, or even employee well-being.
So if a company wants to make lasting change, it's not enough to just send out memos or implement new policies on paper. They need to find and cultivate those keystone habits.
That's a great point. And just like with personal habits, changing a company's habits requires understanding the cues, routines, and rewards that are driving the current behavior. Then it's about finding ways to redirect those patterns toward better outcomes.
This has been a truly eye-opening deep dive. We've learned about the golden rule of habit change, the surprising effectiveness of AA, the vital role of belief, and even how entire organizations can transform themselves by focusing on keystone habits.
It's clear that changing habits, whether personal or organizational, isn't about willpower alone. It's about understanding the underlying mechanisms and finding the right support systems to make those changes stick.
Absolutely. And here's a final thought for you as you go about your day. Think about one habit you'd like to change. Don't just think about the routine itself. What are the hidden cues and rewards driving it? Who could be your ally in this journey? Keep those questions in mind as you go about making those changes.